What if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, that there's something wrong with that or there's something wrong with them?
Spending is a tax. As soon as the government spends money, eventually it's a tax. Sometimes we put a direct tax on the people, sometimes we borrow the money, and sometimes we print the money.
Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth.
The Patrick Riggins Show. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Oh, yes. You can tell by the wild music playing that it's that time of week again. Opening the show with Avenged Sevenfold's new release, Shepherd of Fire. Or some people say it from this area, Far. The Patrick Riggins Show is on the air, carrying the torch of freedom and liberty. I am the shepherd of that fire. It burns those who want to take away your freedom and liberty, but it warms those who want to defend it from attack. If you're one of our many listeners from around the world tuning in over the internet, welcome to the show, fighting for freedom and liberty for everyone, regardless of where you live. Natural human rights aren't limited to just the people in supposedly free countries. Everyone deserves them. The United States Declaration of Independent States, all men are created equal, meaning everyone, men, women, inside this country or out. We also welcome our broadcast listeners tuning in over the airwaves as part of the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and locally here in Knoxville, Tennessee on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Boy, it has been a crazy week, hasn't it? A lot going on, and I'm going to go ahead and warn you, I'm not getting to everything I had planned. There is just no way. But I'll be posting a lot of what I don't get to talk about after the show on our Facebook page, and that's at facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. Again, facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. You don't have to be a member of Facebook to view that page. Just type in that address and ignore the little sign-up box at the top of the page. You can read everything we post there without having an actual Facebook account. One of the stories this week is the big distraction from the mess of Obamacare by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. He exercised the so-called, quote, nuclear option to effectively eliminate the tactic of filibuster to stop agency and judicial nominees who are sent to the Senate by the president for approval. I'm sure you've heard and seen the clips from Harry Reid and then Senator Obama back in 2005, but claiming that this type of thing is the wrong thing to do, that it's, I think they used the words, disgraceful for the Republicans who were in the majority then to exercise the nuclear option. But fast forward to now, with the Democrats in power, now it's okay. Not to give the Republicans and conservatives a break on this blatant hypocrisy, but Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Bill Kristol, Karl Rove, and many, many others, all of these people were in favor of the nuclear option in 2004, 2005, when the shoe was on the other foot, when the Republicans were getting their judicial nominees held up. But now, all of a sudden, our country's falling apart because the Democrats changed the Senate rules. This is why this show is different. I'm not a hypocrite. I don't argue for something when one party is in power and then take the exact polar opposite position when the other party is in power. I just don't do that. And I don't think most Americans like to hear that. But before you conservatives start piling your email into my inbox, I've got the direct transcript from Rush's own website. This is from his show on May 9th, 2005. Quote, "The filibustering of judges is unconstitutional. It undermines the president and the Senate's constitutional powers. And why? because a small minority of leftist senators refused to abide by the election results. That's all this is. And our guys on the Republican side, at least some of them, apparently don't care to fight that out. Now, this is the voice of the conservative movement, or that's what Rush is billed as anyway. You conservatives screaming about what happened this week, do you remember agreeing with Rush about this in 2005? Here's another quote from that exact same show, May 9th, 2005. He said, if a Republican majority in the Senate can't even, or worse even, won't step up to the plate to reinstitute what was the status quo for 214 years and push back the Chuck Schumers and Ted Kennedys and the Joe Bidens, then what principles do they stand for? This isn't about the Senate getting along. That was thrown to the wind when the Democrats started filibustering and undermining 214 years of history. This is about defending the Constitution. We elected a Republican majority in the Senate. We expect them to represent us. It's no more complicated than that. I apologize for not having the audio from this show. We tried to track it down for hours, but couldn't find it. And I'm sure if we had requested it from the EIB network, they probably wouldn't have been too keen on providing it. I've also got where Sean Hannity said basically the same thing. He was on Hannity and Combs, March 2nd, 2005. Here's what Sean Hannity stated, quote, there are 7 specific instances in the Constitution where they call for a supermajority. I believe it's unconstitutional to filibuster. It is not about advice and consent now to ask for a supermajority on judicial nominations. I believe that is not constitutional. But listen, Democrat, Republican, who cares? We don't run our country on what either party says. We run it by the Constitution, or we're supposed to anyway. The text of the Constitution requires a 2/3 majority in the Senate for confirming treaties, for expelling one of its members, and in concurring in the proposal of constitutional amendments. In all other matters, the Constitution gives the Senate the power to make its own rules. All of these conservatives screaming like stuck pigs, all of these liberals gloating over their supposed victory, all of these people are missing the key point here. Again, this is why you listen to this radio show and why its audience is growing by leaps and bounds. Not just where we're broadcast over the air, but around the world via our internet feeds. People are getting a truly American point of view and not one tainted by the political process or blind party loyalty. Look, the key point here is the government has too much power. What the federal government is doing should not really affect you. It was never meant to be this powerful and intrusive. Most of the government power was to be exercised at the state and local levels, closest to the people of this country. Even then, though, government power should not have that much to do with your day-to-day life, not in a free country. But since it does affect you this much, that should be telling you that the government has become too big. Its power is too invasive. There's too much on the table. The stakes are too high. The government has too much power because whatever it does, history demonstrates that government will screw it up. Take Obamacare, for instance. The stakes are too high for you to have the government meddling in your health care and screwing it up. If they screw things up, people can die. People won't get the care they want or may even need. If the government wasn't so intrusive in our daily lives, then whether the Senate had to get 51 votes or 60 votes for some judge somewhere, it wouldn't matter. If the government were abiding by the Constitution, then who ran an agency wouldn't matter. All of these rules and regulations would have to be passed by Congress and not created deep inside an agency in Washington by some nut with an agenda. I addressed that all just this last week, or maybe it's the week before. You can check our archives, youtube.com/Patrick Reagan Show. So why the uproar? Because both sides of the political spectrum, the conservatives and the liberals, both want to tell you how to live your lives. Both are slaves to their political parties. This isn't what America is about. It's about freedom and liberty, something neither party really wants you to have. And why is that? Because just like government, what's the need for a political party if we have our freedom and liberty? That's why we need to fight to get it back. Get people into office who will vote for us and then pull them back out and put another person in before these government temptations get a chance to get hold of them. We've already lost most of the people up there right now. As I said on the show last week, there's not one congressional representative that hasn't voted for something unconstitutional. Not one. Everyone up there has voted for unconstitutional legislation in clear violation of their oaths to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. We're already up on the first break of the show, the Patrick Riggins Show, here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Hey, look, when we return, we'll have even more stuff to talk about that you won't be hearing anywhere else. And why is that? It's because no other radio show has me, Patrick Riggins. Stay with us over this next short break. Leading into this segment with a good motto: if it takes forever, I will die trying. We don't give up here on the Patrick Riggins Show, and you shouldn't either. We are here every week on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. You know, I've been reading, and I'm sure you have as well, about this typhoon that devastated the Philippines and the response to it by our country and others. One story I read was complaining about how the Chinese government hasn't given enough money to the Philippines. What I think is instructive is that's how it should be. The Chinese government has the correct idea, but probably for the wrong reasons. This disaster has resulted in almost $100 million being sent into that area, the bulk of it coming from us, the United States. That doesn't count all the other resources being sent there in the form of U.S. military flights and other manpower as well. Altogether, the United States supplies over $1.4 billion in international food aid each year. $1.4 billion. And we have people in this country going hungry. Not starving, mind you, but hungry. And this money isn't coming from the government. It's coming from you. It's your money providing this. The government doesn't have any money other than what it takes from others, mainly you, the taxpayers of this country. This is something the government should not be doing. It isn't right to do it within this country, have our taxpayers forced to pay the medical bills, the food bills, the housing bills. We're forced to pay those bills, and now we're forced to pay the bills of other people all around the world. One of the big questions that has arisen from this disaster is whether to start buying the food we are supplying closer to the disaster site or continue to ship it from the United States as it's done now. Of course, everyone growing and shipping food within the program here in this country, they want things to remain the same. One quote from a story in the New York Times was from Danny Murphy. He's a Mississippi farmer who's also president of the American Soybean Association. He said the food aid program was fine the way it was and didn't need changing. His quote is, "For the most part, it has worked well for 60 years, Mr. Murphy said. It provides jobs in this country, and people get the food they need. Why change that?" Well, for one reason, Mr. Murphy, you're living off the backs of your neighbors. Oh, sure, it provides jobs because it's the government is using the money taken from other taxpayers to buy your product and ship it overseas. Apparently, he doesn't mind that at all. But I bet you $100 if you asked him if he should be taxed and the money given to someone in the housing project in his city to pay their bills, oh, he'd object to that. But he'd probably be all for the government buying his soybeans and giving them to those same people in the housing projects. You see, as long as it benefits him. And this is the problem in America. Too many people find it real easy to spend someone else's money. Now, if Mr. Murphy wants to donate money or food to those victims of that typhoon in the Philippines, well, then go right ahead. But no, he'd rather you be forced to do it as well through taxes as long as he benefits from it. Because after all, if he doesn't take the money, someone else will, right? So that makes it okay. The money the government is taking in the form of taxes should be used to benefit the people of this country. In a perfect world, most of what government is doing would be taken over by private industry anyway. But I'm a realist. I don't live completely in a fantasy world. I know that's not happening soon. But if the government is taking our tax money, is it too much to ask that it be spent on us? If I want to donate to causes helping people around the world, that should be my option. I shouldn't be forced into this charity by tyranny. This, you will give money, you will help people, and you will help the people we say you'll help. Now, you can go over and above that, but you will be spending money to help those people the government decides you'll be helping, whether you want to or not. See, the government is afraid you won't act in the manner in which it requires you to act. That's what this is all about. You won't give money to help those poor people, so the government is going to make you do it. It does this through using part of your tax money for charity. And the people excusing this behavior, they don't trust you to spend your money in the way they deem is correct either. They'll say, oh, Patrick, you're being cold-hearted. We have to help these people. Well, fine, then help them. Take your hard-earned money or your easy-earned money, whatever it is, but take your money and help those people all you want. But they don't want to do that. They want to spend your money. And because neither these liberal busybodies nor their buddies in government think you'll do that, then they'll make you do it through taxation. Because, Patrick, morally it's the right thing to do. Helping these poor people all around the world. I've said it many times before on this radio show. You start talking morals and abortion or gay marriage, and these people will scream at you not to impose your morals on them. But when it involves spending your money overseas, or even spending it on a charity within our country, well, start talking about restricting that, and you're called cold-hearted and hateful, and if that doesn't shut you up, they'll call you racist. You see, liberals and big government types, and that last group includes a whole lot of conservatives, they're all about you supporting their morals, but they don't want to support yours. Again, you can't be trusted to do the right thing, to spend your money in the way they think is correct. Because of that, you have to spend it in ways they see as correct and moral. You see why we need to have all this moral judgment out of government, both sides, conservative and liberal? Right now, the total cost for damage from this typhoon is estimated at $288 million. That's it. We have billionaires who could stroke that check out tomorrow. Why aren't they doing it? Because they want the governments around the world to take your money to send over there. Now, I'm not sending my millions. That's mine. But our government sure needs to take your money and spend it over there instead of making improvements here that directly affect your life. You know, for a little perspective on this, Forbes magazine has a list of the 50 richest people in the Philippines. The top person is Henry Sy, S-Y, and his family. Together, they're worth $12 billion. That's billion with a B. You have to go all the way down to number 17 before you fall out of the billionaires. And that's just the Philippines. Why aren't these people stepping up and taking care of all this? After all, they live there. Why not care for their neighbors? Why are we having to do it? It's as I just said, so much better for the American middle-class taxpayer to foot a large part of the bill than for them to spend their money. No, that's your responsibility. You need to be taxed and your money sent overseas to help all these poor people who've been battered by this storm. Don't expect those millionaires and billionaires in the Philippines to do it. Nope. You working middle-class people in the United States need to have your money spent on that instead of improving the roads in your neighborhood. Why should you get to enjoy the benefits of paying your tax money when so many people around the world are suffering? Excuse my language, but this is what's pissing people off at government and the governments and these rich people all around the world. You're expected to be taxed at, 20% or so, maybe even more. So 20% of your money is taken from you, and part of it's sent around the world to supposedly help all these people in other countries. But if, for example, you took 20% of just one of those billionaires' dollars, you'd already be at $200 million and only have $88 million left to raise. So where are all these rich people all around the world? Why aren't they stepping up and paying for this cleanup in the Philippines? If you've been listening at all during this segment, you already know. Much, much easier to take your money than for them to have to spend theirs. On top of it not being the right thing to do, legally or morally, this forced giving, it all comes back to we don't have money for all of this. We're already spending more money than we're taking in. Already we're doing this. Everyone knows it. Everyone acknowledges it. It's no secret being kept by the government. Everyone inside and outside this country knows we're running huge budget deficits. And even with all this knowledge, we still have people wanting to send all of this money all around the world. We don't have the money. It's no different than if you're paying a mortgage and car loans and other debts and someone says, hey, can you donate to this charity? Well, you have to tell them no. It's not because you're a bad person that you don't care. You just don't have the money. Oh, we're already up on the half-hour break here. Hey, when we come back from this bottom of the hour break, we'll try to work in a little bit more on governments. We'll hit on Obamacare, and we'll talk about how to keep a clear head during all this mess in our country. When we come back here on the Patrick Riggin Show on, what else but the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Welcome back to the second half hour of the Patrick Riggin Show. We've covered a lot during the first two segments, and I still have a huge stack of stuff to get to before we run out of time this week. So let's jump right on in. But first, let me mention, we're here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Oh, why don't we talk about Obamacare? Everybody talks about Obamacare. Obamacare has been in the news since forever. But I wanted to hit on a quick update from an angle. Well, it's not being talked about on the other radio and television shows. I guess that's being weird as a kid and looking at things from odd points of view, now finally paying off. But on to Obamacare. Apparently, no one is really signing up for this program, the least of which are the younger, more healthier people, the very people this system needs to sign up to compensate for the elderly and more sickly people who will be using lots and lots of healthcare resources. So, what can you take away from this? What I want you to notice is, given a choice, most Americans don't want to fund the bailout of other citizens. They don't want to pay their medical bills, their food bills, pay for their housing and cell phones. They don't want to have others living off their hard work. Now, they'll say they don't mind. You see in polls all the time when asked about a certain government program that takes money from one taxpayer and gives it to another in the form of charity, these polls will say over half of Americans or 3/4 of Americans say we should care for this or that group of people. But when it comes down to it, when they see they're the ones who are getting shafted to pay the medical bills of these other people, they won't do it. And that's what Obamacare is. The shifting of the burden of paying one person's medical bills onto another person who is generally young and healthy and not in the need of a lot of medical care, if any. Everyone figured this out pretty quickly. That's why the government is mandating it. If it was a good idea, if it was something everyone really wanted, you wouldn't have to make it mandatory now, would you? I don't see the government requiring you to go see whatever new Disney movie comes out or buy the new iPhone or purchase a faster computer. You see, you want all of those things, but you don't want to subsidize the health care of someone else, so you aren't buying Obamacare. Therefore, the government has to require you to do it. So it must not be such a great idea then, huh? So why do so many people in these polls agree with Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and all these other socialist programs? Well, for one, they don't want to be seen as cold-hearted and uncaring by whoever's asking. But more importantly, two, because they don't see the money for these programs anyway. That money is all taken out of your paycheck before you even get it. Why do you think the government doesn't make you write out a check at the end of the year for all that money? Because you'd be livid. That's why. No, you see, it's much easier to require your employer to remove that money from your paycheck. And then at the end of the year, most people get a nice little overpayment check called a tax refund, and they think they're getting away with something. See, the problem with Obamacare is they didn't do that the same way. They required you to purchase this medical insurance all at one time. When you went to the website, if you could get through, that is, what you saw was a 100% or more increase over what you're paying now, and that's pretty hard to miss. Either that or you saw the big increase when your insurance company sent you the new premium statement on your updated policy, which would meet these new government regulations. Both places, though, the numbers were right there, and people didn't like that at all. See, right now, the government gets first crack at your paycheck before you do. They take out all their money and then leave you with whatever's left over. You don't get paid your salary. You get paid whatever's left over after the government takes out its cut. Sure, you see a line on your pay stub, but most people don't pay any attention to that. They just think, hey, maybe I'll get most of that back. The next shoe to drop will be Obamacare doing the same thing. The government will sign you up for health care, but then they'll just take the premiums out of your paycheck along with all the other taxes they already skim off the top before you see it. Well, we understand you can't pay these premiums, so what we're going to do is require your employer to act as our lackey and take that money out too. You see, that way the money will be taken out little by little over the next year and make it easier for hardworking Americans to get ahead. That's what our president always seems to like to state. Mark my words, that's what's going to happen because the government needs this done. Everyone knows if you're young and healthy, you're getting screwed by this plan by the people who aren't. They need you to pay the medical bills through your premiums that you'll never use. What's funny is, all of a sudden, paying other people's bills isn't such a great idea when it's coming directly out of your own pocket. If all these decades of after the collapse of communism and socialism around the world, that doesn't demonstrate to you that these types of systems don't work, then this mess of Obamacare should just make that abundantly clear to you now. It's a move towards socialism, pure and simple. And those types of systems just don't work. That's why it's mandated. Your participation is mandatory. That should immediately tell you this isn't a good nor an efficient system for delivering health care. Well, Patrick, the current system just wasn't working. That's because the current system isn't capitalism. It's still government meddling and driving up the cost for everyone else. In a pure system, you could get the best health care you could afford. Same thing you get when you go out to eat. You could buy the best steak you can afford. If government mandated that everyone gets prime rib, then prime rib would be unaffordable outside having a government subsidy or subsidy via the, quote, steak insurance companies. The demand would drive the cost of prime rib through the roof, just like it's done with our medical care. It's almost unaffordable to anyone outside the insurance or government subsidy system. If we truly wanted healthcare to be more affordable, if that was the goal, the government would back out of the system. Most of these people in government aren't stupid. Quite a few are, but most aren't. They know government's distorting the market, but they see it as another way to buy votes, so they support keeping government involved. Until we demand they stop, they aren't going to do anything about fixing this problem. And unfortunately, the government has the elderly and poor so scared that death is just around the corner, they aren't in any mood to do away with government involvement, which incidentally suits most people in government just fine. And yes, that describes most conservatives and practically all liberals. They both want government heavily involved in your life, as long as it's involved in the ways they see as acceptable. As long as government meddling is accomplishing their societal goals, they feel like should be imposed on the rest of this country. Oh, in reality, the world as well. All right, we're up on the last of the show already. This is the last break. When we come back, Oh, we'll talk about how to keep your head clear of all of this mess that's happening in our country and our government and, in the larger part, the world. When we return on the Patrick Riggin Show and the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Welcome back to the Patrick Riggin Show. Some good old Audio Slave coming back into this segment. This song called Revelations. Hey, that's exactly what you get on this radio show, Revelations. Revelations about freedom and liberty, ways of thinking and looking at the issues affecting this country from a viewpoint of the true American, original American values of freedom and liberty. You're listening to us here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm going to make a show host executive decision. I'm going to hold this story. I was going to do this segment, and I want to talk about this just for a minute that I ran across here. I know a lot of you probably heard about this story when it ran in New York Post by John Crudell about the census worker faking the numbers to make unemployment look better than it really was right before the last presidential election. One thing I think is interesting is how this story is running almost the exact same track as the one involving the IRS and the Tea Party nonprofit applications. Let me read real quick. Here's part of the column regarding this latest flap. Congress is now looking into the story meaning John Crudell, broke earlier this week about the census manipulation and the unemployment rate survey. One former census worker says he was told by a superior to fake data that went into the survey. The superior has denied it. This is the exact same thing that happened with the IRS and the Tea Party. The claim was made, and the superior at the local office denied it happened. The column went on to say the entire organization was a rat's nest run by political order takers who often bent rules. Complaints range from veterans not getting the job preference they were promised to training material being substandard and conflicting. And because workers were subject to very serious fines if they spoke out in public, few did. Same thing as the IRS story. Speak out and you'll be charged and fined. The people working in the offices in both these cases saw the abuse, yet decided not to say anything about it. The column went on to say many media organizations are falling back on the same old cop-out, that the former census rep was a rogue creating an isolated instance of manipulation, that one person in one office couldn't possibly move the U.S. unemployment rate. Again, it's not the whole system. It doesn't extend back to Washington. If anything happened, it was a lone individual acting on their own. Certainly nothing in the form of directions or guidance from the Obama administration. Oh, no, sir, nothing like that occurred. The column finishes up with this thought. Maybe there really was one rogue in Philadelphia, but was it the field rep or a supervisor who controlled a lot more surveys than just the one guy who cheated? Again, if you're awake and breathing during the IRS Tea Party scandal, you can clearly see the parallels between that story and this Census Bureau and its manipulation of the unemployment numbers to try and sway the election. Of course, a lot of conservative commentators have been screaming, see, you can't trust Obama, you can't trust the administration. Look, you can't trust any of them. This is what I don't understand sometimes. Why don't people get this? Is it because they can't deal with seeing a corrupt government for what it is? Are they afraid of losing their money, their check coming from the government? Do they just not care? For those people, let me remind you, you can't trust the government. It is just like any other living being. It is going to do what's best for itself. For a real good example, look at the government shutdown. The government was making it as hard on the citizens of this nation as it could, doing everything within its power to punish the citizens of this country for trying to demand the government stop spending so much money. We have whole generations of American citizens who refuse to see the reality of government, and a large part of the reason is because our government education system. Do you really think an education system run by the government is going to be critical of it? Do you think school children are going to be taught to distrust the government as our founders warned us to do? No, of course not. That would be like sending your children to a Christian school and thinking they'll be taught that following Jesus is wrong. No, they'll be taught Christian doctrine, morals, stories, and parables. Same thing in a government school. School children are taught that government providing for the citizens of the nation is a good thing, that they should be happy to pay taxes so that their hard-earned money can go to pay someone else's bills, that this country wouldn't be able to get along without a strong governmental presence. And anyone who argues against that concept, who tries to convince them otherwise, well, they're probably just some anti-government lunatic, or worse, a domestic terrorist. So be sure and report those types of people to the government so they can keep an eye on those weirdos. Now we have all these people who are incredulous that their precious government would lie to them. Oh, sure, it can lie to the Republicans or the Democrats, whoever's not on your side. Government can screw them over, that's fine. But wait, now it's screwing me. I support the government. I said this not 6 months ago. These people supporting and excusing all of this, the government will eventually get around to you after it deals with the people who oppose it right now. All right, we're already up on the last of the Patrick Riggin Show here. Hey, look, if you want more information about us, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Patrick Riggin Show, facebook.com/Patrick Riggin Show. Same thing for our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Patrick Riggin Show. You can get all of our archive shows there. And you can also email us at patrickrigginshow@gmail.com or drop us a card and letter here at WLKI. Hey, remember, liberty begins with you in your mind. Keep that in your head all this week. And then join me next Saturday afternoon at 4, where we'll be fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. Thanks for listening this week, and have a fantastic coming week.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on the Patrick Riggin Show. Be there.